So that was the F major scale. You notice that once again I started with my little finger on the 3rd fret, but one thing that the examiner won't pick you up on is your left hand fingerings. So you can, if you choose to, start with your 3rd finger. It's entirely up to you. So it's just entirely dependent on your preference. Your usual checkpoints will be tempo, so reaction time to the instruction of the particular scale that the examiner is asking you to play, and tone control. Now, to expand a little bit more on tone control, you've obviously got a large area that you can play from. So a very basic position with a standard type of Spanish guitar is the thumb just over the sound hole and the fingers round about, or the index finger round about where the rosette is. That will give you a rough guide. Everybody's hands are different. You know, if your hands are a lot smaller, they will be closer together a little bit, but in general, it's a good idea to have the thumb just over the sound hole, and you'll get this. But the sound obviously changes the further you go towards the sound hole. So what we're doing when we're playing scales, we're trying to create a kind of neutral sound. We're just trying to find the area that the string can ring loud, which is further towards the bridge. But we're also finding the sound that sounds the sweetest, which is obviously the other side, the sound by the fingerboard. So the best compromise between volume and tone is somewhere between the two. So if you imagine a line between, say, here and here, and then you draw somewhere that's halfway, that would lead you to roughly where the rosette is as you look down here. So that is your ideal position really for playing any scales. So it doesn't matter which scale you're playing, they'll all sound roughly correct there, just round about the rosette. One other consideration with your tone production is how much nail, and I'm quite a long nail player, so if I was to play more on the nail, here the sound is a lot thinner, whereas if I tried to play more on the flesh, and that's a lot further in than I would normally pluck. So finding the right balance when you're practicing just whatever the scales are, this is where the scale practice becomes actually quite an interesting and important exercise. So it's not just playing the pieces, this gives you an opportunity to think about the sound that you're making and the tempo that you're playing at. Now when it comes to the alternation, here, unlike the G major scale, where you start M, I on the first string, you will then, on the F major, you will play an M and then an I on the next string. So the way that the fingers cross over will be different. You can actually experiment with this, and because the examiner won't really be too worried about if you start I, M, I, M, or M, I, M, I. You have the choice. Just in general, an examiner will notice if you start to do this, and that's use one finger in a repeated sense. I think the examiner will notice that. So I wouldn't encourage you to try to play any of these scales with one finger, mainly because it's the analogy that I always think of is it better to walk or is it better to hop? And if everybody hopped, you know, it's inefficient. It would also look silly, but the main thing is the equivalent of hopping on a guitar is using one finger repeatedly, because it tends to create this kind of this jumping and the one hand, because you have to keep resetting the hand, whereas when you've got two fingers moving, the hand tends to be more relaxed. The more relaxed you are, the better the sound that you can create. So I think I've pretty much covered all I need to say about tempo, metronome markings, and your reaction time to the examiner asking for you to play a particular scale. But that's the general rule, is be relaxed and hopefully be drilled enough on your scales and be as well drilled on your scales as you would do any of your pieces that you have to perform.